In terms of big raging political controversies, the latest one is HS2. Now, this was a scheme which was supposed to bring high-speed rail, but now many of the people who initially supported it have deserted HS2, the latest being the former Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, Alistair Darling. He said when the facts change, his views have to change as well, saying that economic benefits are highly contentious and it's far more costly than was originally predicted. Andrew, what do you think about this? I have to say, not a big fan. I have the £80 billion they're talking about. I mean, imagine the amount we could have spent if we used that to invest in housing, sort out our massive housing crisis. That would have created jobs, stimulated the economy. These costs are way above what was initially projected, and surely just is not the solution when we're actually trying to reinvigorate the rail network.
I think we're in danger of agreeing here, Aaron. I mean, this is not in the contract we signed.
This is definitely, we've gone off script, I'm afraid.
HS2 is probably the stupidest idea in Britain. It's stupider than it's even more stupid than wind farms. It's a huge amount of money. Potentially up to 80 billion, you say, even by the government's own admission, is 41 billion. And the fact is, if I had 41 billion pounds to spend on the railways, I know where I put it. I put it on the commuter services that people actually already use, that are already massively overcrowded, that's where there's massive capacity shortages, and I put it, as Alistair Darling says, in making sure that our existing railways can cope with the strain. He's saying that if you spend all the money on HS2, then it causes a nightmare on the rest of the network, which gradually crumbles, and that's what we've seen in France. We've seen they've got some sexy, whizzy high-speed lines, but the rest of the network's in a rotten state.
And this is where I'm going to try and inject a bit of disagreement. If we're talking about the future of the railways, I think one of the ways we could sort it out, if you like, is we want to sort out ticket prices, soaring way above, at the moment, people's wages. The way to solve that, surely, is to take each franchise back into public ownership, and instead of wasting all that money on shareholders' profits and a fragmented railway system, use that to reduce ticket prices, to encourage people to travel by rail, which is good for the environment because it gets people out of cars.
Oh, and you know what? I'm sorry about this, but the agreement continues.
Oh, no.
I can't, again, I despise and loathe privatised railway companies, and the fact is that there is a nationalised one at the moment, East Coast, which runs the line up to Newcastle.
It's the most efficient one, according to all the research.
It's got better punctuality than Virgin, which I hate like a passion.
You're turning into a loony lefty, Andrew. What's going on?
It's the experience of travelling by train has turned me into a loony lefty, and I think a lot of people on the right would actually be really really want to see the railways brought back into public ownership. I don't want to spend fortunes on buying out train companies. I just want to wait till the franchise expires and then take it back.
Well, just going back straight to HS2, we've got Ross Clark who's on the phone. Ross Clark has written a piece for The Spectator talking about how high-speed rail has just been dropped in California and France. Now it's time for Britain to take the hint as well. Ross, good morning.
Good morning.
So, Ross, tell us, what's the case against HS2? Why do you think this is something we just have to just abandon and cut our losses, if you like?
Well, it comes down very simple to the money. I mean, it'd be great having a high-speed rail line up to the north of England, but not at 43 billion and certainly not at 70 billion. The whole thing is really quite over-designed for this country. I mean, we've got high-speed railways are pretty expensive business all over the world, but in particular the geography of Britain, there's a sort of magic level of about 2.5 to 3 hours. If you can get a rail journey below that sort of time frame, then people start using the train and the airline services disappear. But, our main cities are already within that sort of travelling time frame. London, Manchester's about 2 hours, 6 minutes. It's only really once you get up to sort of London to Newcastle, London to Glasgow to Edinburgh.
That's right. Five out of 6 of our main urban areas are within 200 miles of each other in England. So every major urban area in England except Tyneside is within 200 miles of all the others, and that is. That's a reason why actually we don't need high-speed rail. It's a small country. I mean,
not only are our cities sort of closer packed together than in mainland Europe, but I mean, HS2 is a train designed to go actually faster than the sort of French HS2. The top speeds could be 225 miles an hour. I mean, even the TGVs only go 190. And I mean, you think of everything else you could spend on that money, the sort of bus services and commuter rail services, but of course they're very unsexy projects.
Well, Ross, can I give you a counter-argument? Lucy Powell, who's the Labour MP for Manchester Central, she's tweeted this morning, HS2 will bring vital extra capacity and will boost Manchester's economy. The city centre will also benefit from the new hub station. How do you shoot down that argument in flames?
I agree. The HS2 will bring benefits to central Manchester, but it's the sort of Boltons and the places which are going to be bypassed by the line, places like Stoke-on-Trent, Coventry and Doncaster, which of course is Ed Miliband's constituency.
That's a really good point.
Towns which have really good train services at the moment. They will end up with worse train services.
What you've got, actually, in all these regional centres is a massive disparity between the regional hub, Leeds, Manchester, which are actually doing quite well, and then all the satellite cities like Wakefield, Huddersfield, Bolton, Oldham, which are doing much, much less well, and this will only exacerbate the divisions between them. And you're absolutely right. Wakefield, for instance, which is on the fast line at the moment to London, is very against HS2 because it will lose its fast train to London, and you'll have to go to Leeds and change. Equally, Sheffield, the fast train will not go to central Sheffield. It'll go to Meadowhall, which is outside.
And the same in Nottingham.
And the same in Nottingham and Derby.
We're talking about sort of tram service.
That's
to
right.
People from the centre.
So at the moment, you've got a fairly fast train anyway from the centre of Nottingham, the centre of Sheffield and centre of Derby right into London, and if HS2 starts, you're going to have to get a train out to some parkway station on the outskirts and then truck down to London on HS2. You're not going to save any time at all.
But there's also a moral issue here of, spending such a large amount of taxpayers' money. I mean, railways are expensive anyway. They consume about £4 billion of subsidy every year. But if we're going to spend that sort of amount of subsidy, the only excuse for doing it is that it's a public service that is available to the entire population. And you think of HS2, it's a premium service designed for quite wealthy people who want to...
It's more expensive, certainly the existing one's more expensive than the regular trains, the one we've got already, HS1 in Kent. Just quickly, Ross, I mean, do you see signs that Labour is... I mean, these are interesting. We've had Peter Mandelson saying it's an expensive mistake. We've had Alistair Darling, key kind of party elders. Alistair Darling might come back into the shadow cabinet, indeed, after he's polished off Alex Salmond in the Scottish independence referendum. But, I mean, do you see signs that Labour is going cold on this? The front bench of Labour is still firmly in favour, it looks like.
Yeah, well, I mean, Labour figures are certainly going very cold on it. And, I mean, you would have thought that Labour, having its heartlands in the sort of northern cities, would be in favour. But for this, very, very reason which you said, which we've been talking about, it's your Manchesters and your Leeds are going to benefit, and it's all these other marginal constituencies. I mean, marginal in the sense that they're not at the centre of the northern conurbations, Sunderlands and places like that, where... I think Labour candidates, Labour MPs are going to look at the sort of amount of money that's being spent on HS2.
Well, Ross, can I ask you, actually? I mean,
we should spend this better.
If you were a betting man, maybe, for example, if you had, I don't know, £70 billion spare, which you were going to bet on something. Now we've had the likes of Lord Ashcroft, the former Conservative deputy chairman, for example, come out against HS2. Other figures on the right have come out against it, as well as people on the Labour side. If you were going to bet, do you think this is just not going to go ahead? The government are just going to end up scrapping HS2 at this rate?
Well, I've written in this week's Spectator that if it does go ahead, I shall buy a ticket on the first train out of Euston and eat my hat in the dining car, and I shall stick to that.